By personal identity, you mean like people knowing who you are as an individual outside of your team?
Yes.
I think it matters because I think people look up to sports figures, and so it matters who you are. If you're representing yourself beyond the team, you're also representing your city, you're representing the organization behind the team, so I think it definitely matters your character, just in general, who you are, I think always matters.
I do think their character matters to society because if they are not the best people, that could pose a huge problem since a lot of younger children are looking up to them. So I think they have an obligation to be the best role models they can be.
I do think it does because a lot of people look up to a lot of professional athletes like LeBron James or like Kevin Durant. I just know basketball players. But a lot of little kids look up to them, so they are trying to be like them, be like the next LeBron James. So yeah, I don't know how to answer this.
Matters to society.
Yes.
Why?
Why? Because they're role models. So, what they do, kids will follow.
Do you think it's fair for them to be held to that expectation?
Yes.
Wait, Steve, all of these interviews really make me think that athlete's identity really does matter.
I think obviously, yes, I think they have a moral obligation, social obligation, as someone in the spotlight that's making a living off of being a sports athlete, and they're doing that because of public opinion in favor of them. However, should it be a requirement? I don't know if it's a requirement, but it definitely should be something that they should hold themselves to the standard. As we do that, but yet think about how many exceptions we make to those character flaws. So a guy is arrested or has spousal abuse, and yet we tend to overlook it based off of how well he can perform on a team. And then we have this double standard that we have this expectation for him to have a high social awareness and image, but yet we don't hold him to that standard based off of how well he performs sometimes. That's an interesting dilemma for that, I think.
I would say no, that it doesn't matter, at least not to everyone, because an example would be that players in the NFL and the NBA, they oftentimes get charged with domestic violence and other misdemeanors, but they're still idolized and people still look up to them as their favorite basketball player or as their favorite football player.
So why do you think Aaron thought that?
Well, we've all seen the Charles Barkley video.
I am not a role model. I'm not paid to be a role model. I am paid to wreak havoc on the basketball court. Parents should be role models. Just because I dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids.
So as we can see from Charles Barkley, if the athlete doesn't want to be perceived as a role model, they're not going to act like role models.
Alright, but we see in the PBS article that society is still going to look up to them as role models, and that they have a responsibility to society to live up to that standard.
I agree with your point. Like we saw in the Ben Johnson video, whether he cared about it or not, his use of steroids destroyed his publicity and then took away essentially people's trust in him. That's why in the classroom we saw the teacher saying to the kids like, Ben Johnson is no longer a role model anymore because he had done something to betray the trust of the people. And then I would assume that he didn't care about it as much when he was using steroids. All he cared about was the money and the fame he brings to himself. But he didn't think about losing them because he lost the fans, lost the...
An example on the other side of that would be Bo Jackson, like in the 30 for 30 that we watched. He really showed his class. He was a quiet man. He never did anything to hinder his name off the field or on the field, for example. And every time, he was very quiet until he got on the field, and that's where he showed his skill and his excellence in sports. On the opposing side of that example, it would be Bo Jackson, like we saw in the 30 for 30. He really showed his talents on the field. Very quiet man off the field, never did anything to hinder his name. But when he stepped on the football and baseball fields, he really showed his talents in his sports.
So So it looks like we have our conclusion. Despite whether or not it's written down in a contract, professional athletes do have a social obligation. So it looks like we have our conclusion. Whether it's written down in the contract or not, professional athletes do have a social obligation to uphold a good persona that all people can look up to.
That's for us here on News Night. Stay tuned for Fox's new hit show, The Big Bang Theory.
Cerny's fun.
It matters. They matter.